It's Monday, and that so happens to be the day that I like to talk about monsters. Hello, and welcome to Monster Mondays. I am Jeff Arbuckle, co-host of the podcast Film Seizure, that you can catch each Wednesday at filmseizure.com or at a number of podcast providers online. Backed by popular demand and by scheduling plans, I am digging right back into the Ultra Q series with episodes number 3 and 4. And I'm not kidding. I had, I think, at least 3 different people whose only connection with each other is me comment about how glad they were that I was doing this series on this show, or sharing general excitement that this was being talked about. Let it be known that I don't just have fans, but I like doing stuff for them too. So, to recap really quick, Ultra Q came from Tsuburaya Productions. Eiji Tsuburaya was a close friend of Toho Studios, having designed the earliest monsters, including Godzilla himself. And he was dubbed the godfather of tokusatsu and basically created the entire genre of the practical effects giant monsters. Now, if you hadn't read it yet, I did get to see Shin Ultraman, that was just came out and premiered at the film festivals around the country here. It was really cool to see that, because while Ultraman isn't here yet in the Ultra series, at least as far as Monster Mondays is concerned, I got to see the most recent iteration shortly after seeing the very humble beginnings of this sprawling franchise. However, if we go back to the previous episode I did for the first 2 episodes, I very much appreciated this kind of anthology angle with these 3 regular characters tracking down the various stories about the monsters and so forth. It felt a lot like the X-Files, or I don't know, maybe even Friday the 13th, the series. Anyway, another great thing about the first couple of episodes was the general treatment of Yuri Itagawa, the lady reporter who goes out with her friends Jun and Ipei to get the stories. She's not treated like a little girl. She's not treated as a shrieking violet. She's respected. That's great for 1966 and for Japan. So good job, Tsuburaya, on creating a good female lead for your monster series. Now, episode number 3 of Ultra Q is called The Gift from Space, and Jun and Yuri are flying in Jun's plane over the sea, and they spot a UFO making a delicate splashdown with a parachute, and they decide to report it immediately to the Coast Guard or the National Guard or whatever. And the credits open with that fantastic narrator asking what landed and what does it bring with it, and then telling us we're going to experience that separation of mind and body. God, I love the episode's narrators. Anyway, it turns out that what landed in the sea was the capsule of a failed mission to Mars that was launched by Japan. So that does kind of beg the question of what sent it back to its home world and why. Everyone knows that the rocket did make it to Mars. That's not in question. However, if that is truly the case, then most definitely something with intelligence had to send back what belonged to us with some advanced extras, like the parachute itself being made of something that's well beyond our technologies. Inside the capsule, there were 2 golden spheres, and they were about the size of quail eggs. Now, being that these eggs are golden, a thief who broke into a safe and stole some money and found those little quail egg-sized golden spheres, he makes off with them and hires Jun, or seemingly hires Jun, but is actually kind of kidnapping him and threatening him to fly him somewhere where he will eventually escape out of the country. And when the thief drops one of those golden spheres into this hot water that's in kind of this cave that's directly next to or underneath a volcano, that sphere begins to grow into a massive egg. And what's inside the egg is our monster of the episode, Namagan. And it's basically a giant snail-like creature with glowing bug eyes. The second egg was discovered by Ipei, and he makes it into like a pendant for Yuri, which is kind of a cute little gesture when he gives it to her. Junpei and Yuri go into the cave where the thieves were attacked by Nemagon, and they find the thieves dead, and they find the creature, and the monster busts out of the cave and chases all the police and our intrepid heroes off. But eventually Jun is able to lead the creature to its doom by tricking it to go off a cliff into the sea where it bubbles and disintegrates. Everyone is worried about not finding the second egg, and Jun is curious if maybe Mars sent the creatures to Earth to warn us about getting a little too curious about the worlds in our own solar system. And yeah, at that time, nobody has any idea that Yuri has that second monster as a necklace that begins to grow when it gets a little too close to the Bunsen burner. The narrator tells us that as long as the space race is controlled by politics, be sure that another gift from space will be sent to Earth to become a monster, to basically show us that we're not ready to join the universe quite yet. Now we move to episode number 4, which is called Mammoth Flower. Late one night, under the streets of a sleeping city, something breaks through the concrete sidewalks and buildings, and this is the result of Mother Nature deciding to unleash something horrible on this world. At least that's what our very uplifting narrator says. You know, I love the narrator because he always talks about how terrifying this world is and is trying to kill us every day that we take a breath. I mean, this guy has no kind messages for anyone. You live, you will die. Maybe the world will kill you, maybe disease, maybe a giant monster, but things aren't going to end happy for you, kid. Anyway, Jun and Ippei discover that Yuri is investigating a mysterious earthquake that took place overnight and killed a guy. In the moat around the city, there's a curious thing floating, or maybe it's swimming in the water. However, what it is appears to be a giant root. Similar tendrils start showing up elsewhere underground, and they even start wrapping guys up and throwing them around like it's Little Shop of Horrors. There are thorns on these roots, and those things are used to suck blood from people and animals. Jun surmises that this is maybe some sort of a mutated plant that is wandering around underground looking for water sources. The government, though, acts quickly because the old man scientist that our regulars always consult with, Professor Ichino Tani, he knows that this is an ancient flower. It's a type of lotus that used to grow all the time in Japan. Apparently, it wants to reclaim its place on the surface, I guess. But the flower is called Juran, and that very day it sprouts and makes itself known to the people of the city. Now, the building that Juran busts through had Ippei inside, and he's trapped with another friend of theirs. And Jun is worried, but some of the National Guard guys find him and try to escort him out of the building and away from the blood-sucking roots. Meanwhile, another scientist that's assigned to deal with Juran, Dr. Jinda, has the only material that will kill the flower. Basically, it's stuff that will basically deprive the flower of carbon dioxide and suffocate it. Jun is going to fly by the flower and apply that stuff. And while Jun drops the chemical on the plant, the National Guard dudes flamethrower the roots, and, well, that's it. Mammoth Flower defeated. Oh, of course, the narrator tells us that if nature is out of balance, even our lovely, good-smelling flowers that we have all over our house and front lawns and gardens and given out on first dates, well, they'll probably become monsters to kill us for screwing everything up. Anyway, sleep tight, kiddos. That's basically what these narrations are like, and it cracks me up, and I love them so much. But let's get to my 3 things I like about these 2 episodes of Ultra Q. First up, I really do like how Nemagon looks totally alien. The first 2 episodes gave us something that we recognize. The first episode had Godzilla and Rodan lookalikes. The second episode was a giant monkey. We've seen those things before. But in the third episode, Nemagon is completely and totally alien. It's kind of like a slug, but it scoots along kind of like a seal also. It's got those 2 big eyes on top of what we can say kind of look like those protrusions that come off of a slug's head. It's kind of a silly creature, but it really looks great. I bet it scared the crap out of kids watching the show back in the 60s. In a way, it's kind of an unsettling creature. That's one of the things about these monsters is that they're so kind of ridiculous in a way that it becomes... Yeah, because I've seen some of the pictures of the monsters that we'll see later in the series, but they become almost terrifying with how utterly insane that they are. It's in a little bit of a way, it's kind of how people always depict like Lovecraftian creatures as well. They're kind of silly when you really think about it, but they're so wildly out there and different that they do end up becoming kind of unsettling as well. Second, I really like the effects work on the Mammoth Flower episode, the 4th episode. This is a creature that comes up from underground and busts through concrete and buildings and what have you. There's really good miniature work when a Geron comes up from underground. But first of all, you have to have the buildings being smashed and what have you, but there's also some good sidewalk bulges and cracks too. But my favorite thing? The cracks that run up a building when Geron starts to sprout. It would be very easy to just have the building smash and break up and collapse and what have you. But no, they actually show the structure crackling and buckling while the flower is working its way up through the street and foundation. It's a great little attention to detail that works very well in this episode. And I think it's just animated over frames of a shot of a building or of a miniature, but it works really, really well, and it seems to be almost kind of realistic with how that would work out and how that would start to crumble in a building. Now, thirdly, I don't think I mentioned this last time, so let me just say that I really like the music of this series. Sure, the incidental music that plays throughout an episode is pretty good. Sure, sometimes it sounds a little jazzy. Sometimes it's kind of weird and almost electronic or synthesized when dealing with the monsters and what have you. All that stuff is great. It works well for a show that is kind of setting up the fact that we exist alongside these other weird things that may just suddenly come along and upset our lives and the supremacy that we feel like we have as a species on this planet and so forth. But one of the music things that I like the most is the very awkward and completely unrhythmic theme song to the show. It's this totally bizarre percussion-filled piece of music. It's not got usual timing or anything like that whatsoever. It barely even sounds like percussion instruments making these sounds. It's musical, but almost off-puttingly so. It just sets a perfect tone with how the title is created out of something that looks like swirling tie-dye liquid, and it tells you in the opening seconds that what you're about to see is weird, and you know what? You're probably going to like it. So that wraps up this week's Monster Mondays. You can catch new episodes of Monster Mondays each Monday at FilmSeizure.com. Don't forget to follow Film Seizure at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And subscribe to Film Seizure to get both the Film Seizure Podcast each Wednesday and Monster Mondays each Monday at your favorite podcast providers, as well as YouTube. You can also check out my website, bmovieenema.com, and read new articles there every Friday morning. Next time, we're going to stick around Japan for the middle chapter of the animated Godzilla trilogy, currently available in North America on Netflix. So join me for Godzilla City on the Edge of Battle. And until next week, stay spooky.